So welcome everybody on our tech training session that we will provide from Thola joined with Exertus. We do the session of the Thola behind the scenes. So it's also a look on cloud native and how we from Exertus developed the Thola platform. Of course, everybody has already known from the Thola platform because everybody has joined through the Thola platform. We thought we couldn't make it to organize an event without using an event platform, of course, where the session would go with the topic of the sessions. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Wouter Janssens, the founding father of Thola. So we started Thola as a project from within Exertus. I will just give a little bit more details on Thola in a couple of minutes. And then after a couple of months, we decided to create a company of Thola. So now Thola is a separate entity providing a platform to organize online and virtual events. And we got a question from Geert from Micronos to give a session about the architecture of Thola. So that's why we came up with this session, and Dries already also joined the meeting here. I will do the introduction and the part of what is Thola, and then I will give the floor to Dries for the main part about the overview of the architecture, our view on cloud native, on how we implemented cloud native strategy in the Thola platform. We're going to do a very open session, so we will also talk a little bit about issues that we came along on the road, and then of course some improvements that we would like to do in the future, but not did perform yet. So first of all, what is Thola? The Thola is an event platform where you can organize events with. We have started to create a solution for virtual events, where you like this now, everybody is just joining from somewhere in the world, it doesn't matter where. So that's what we call a virtual event. But after about a year, we noticed and we got more and more requests about hybrid events, because we all love, me especially, I love to do in-person events as well, and our platform should of course be able to do that as well, but that's what we call then hybrid events. A hybrid event is like an in-person event but with a digital component, so that people that would like to join from remote, that they can join remote, and they will also be part of the audience, so they can be in contact as well with the attendees that would be on site. And with the virtual events, you have the possibilities to start connecting with everybody, and you can join from anywhere with desktop, laptop, iPad. That are the main tools for the standard platform. And then we also have a mobile version. That's something that we created especially for the hybrid events, that you also can join with the mobile version. Okay. So here we'll show you a little bit of a look and feel, all the things that are possible. These are all cases we performed for customers of us. The top left, you can see that's the design that we are using tonight as well. Our floor was not that full as we have it here on the slide, but our platform is based on graphics, 2D graphics, where you get an avatar assigned and you can customize anything in the platform. And that's something that differentiates us from a lot of other platforms. On the one side, you have platforms where you have lists and you can go through a list of sessions or speakers or persons and try to connect them or discover some information. On the other hand, you have the full 3D platforms, where you can walk around and you have more like the game experience. We created a mixture of both worlds to have a low entry, but still a graphical, nice way of connecting with each other. So we will share the slides afterwards, and if you would like to see some cases, we also have written out some specifics about the cases. You can always go over that. Then we'll a couple of our highlighted features. First of all, what I just mentioned is the customizable venues. So you can design with your own brand, with your corporate identity, like you would like to do. That is a part that we will not cover today because that's more like the user interface and our dashboard on how you can configure everything. But that's not the part in the not the topic for the session. Then one of the other highlighted features is one-on-one networking. So if you maybe after the session would like to connect with somebody you see in the meeting here or in the attendee list, you can also start talking with the person. You can start sending messages or the one-on-one calls. And then with the one-on-one call, you will come and we will set up an online meeting of Teams. And then you go to the meeting and you can start connecting with each other. And Dries will also tell some specifics on how we can set that up and how we do the instant communication to make sure that if you send a message that the other person is notified immediately. We also have the possibility to do public and private events. Today is a public event, so we just shared the reception URL, the registration URL. You can register, you get an email when you come in. But it's also perfectly possible to make it the events private and only work on invite based. And early bird and after work, we have a system that for this meeting, for example, this meeting is active from 16 up to 17 today. But we open the platform until tomorrow, I think 18 hours. So you can come back tomorrow if you maybe would like to show you want to download a presentation. We will make sure that you can find the presentation in the Thola room by the end of today. And if you want, you can come back tomorrow with the original link you had to download the presentation and maybe just walk around or show it to some colleagues if you like the platform. And on our website, you can also discover other features, of course. Okay. Then what we always want to show is the customers we have. We have smaller customers and bigger customers. Some of them will probably be known, but maybe the Maison Jean Monnet is a French house from the European Parliament. So we are also working for the European Parliament. That's very interesting environment to work for. But then, for example, AIC is in Belgium we call it the VZW, non-profit organization from Italy. Zumtobel is a German company, so we work for not only for Belgian companies, but because of course we started in Belgium. It's what you see also with SaaS platforms. They start in their own company in their own country, and then they grow further. So we are on the growth part at the moment. Okay, and I think that was everything for me. And then I will give the word to Dries.
Yes.
And you will be amazed by a full architecture slide to start with, and Dries will break it down for you. Okay.
Thank you, Wouter. I got to explain how we set up and what kind of components we use in Azure to run this platform. You all see the usual suspect like an app service and SQL service and a storage account. So how the application works, we have two front ends. We have a visitor side and an event organizer side. The event organizer side is like a little bit boring configurational stuff you have to do. All the application is a SPA application, a single page application, which is stored in an app service. By then, when we developed the application, the static web application of Azure was not there yet. As soon as the event organizer has the website, he will communicate with an API, and that API will communicate further with different other sources, other APIs, part of the identity server, which is used to log in the users, and with Teams or storage accounts, etc., and the database, of course. We don't use the Azure AD to authenticate you guys on the platform. We use our own custom identity server based on the identity server version 4 of the guys from identity server is Brock and Dominic Bayer. Then on the more interesting side, so you all went to the website of Thola itself. That's the visitor part, which is also another static web application, but because not early existing feature of Azure was the static application, we use an app service to provision this static data, and we call also the same API and the same identity server. But in this case, the visitor will also interact with Teams directly and singular directory. So that means that when the visitor contacts us through the API, he will get an invite to redirect his connection to Singular, and Singular will be used to have an instant communication to the platform. So people know where you are, but also you know where the people are. And if somebody wants to call you or send a message, it's sent by the Singular as a service. I will explain later on that this wasn't the case from the beginning. So it starts as very small and it evolved to include the Singular service. What we also do is the visitor itself will reach out to the CDN and the blob storage to retrieve data of the platform, images, even sessions or stuff that people are put there, like the presentation, the slide deck, etc., etc. So we do not tunnel all this information to the app service. We actually enable the front end to also interact with really part of the Azure environment. And there are some elements behind the scenes. So we use an Azure function instance to handle some events that needs to be handled after an event on the blob storage. So when a certain type of storage is there, we're gonna add some notification to the CDN or make some actions on them. For example, when when an event organizer wants to invite like 1,000 persons, we don't gonna process that while the event organizer is waiting. We push this list of information on a blob storage. Then the blob storage will be processed by the Azure function, and therefore we use a durable function. It will fan out and will invite every person one by one. I see I missed one item, and that's the SendGrid. No, it's not using SendGrid. We use MailJet to send the mails, and that's not on the design, on the overview, because MailJet is not part of Azure, of course. But we do use Azure App Insights and the Key Vault and Azure AD managed identities inside the platform. And our data is stored in 2 different databases. I will explain later why. So this is a general overview. Let's go over one by one the different steps. So we have the app service. We use one service plan to include the app service. The app service is enabled to scale out, and the scale up is done manually. So when we know that there is a big event coming, we manually gonna scale it up in advance so that we are prepared for a huge crowd that's coming. But while the event is ongoing, we usually see traffic peaking at the beginning of an application, and then we scale out, and that's done within the service plan. So what happens in the service plan there are 4 app services and 1 function app. The app service, especially the API, will cache all the user state. So what we need to keep in check is where is everybody on the platform. So when you enter the event, we will track you as to know in which room you are you busy or not busy, and all this information needs to be tracked. And every instance of that app service will keep a cache of this information and try to keep it up to date, backed by SQL Server. The app servers are also used for the static website. Like I explained when we started with this project, the static website from Azure wasn't there. So that will be one of the possible improvements you will see later on the slide. And then I mentioned one function app, but that's only used to process events on the storage account. So we do not use the function app to interact with the front end. So for the storage, we only use the blob storage and the queues. The blob storage is stored for the event blobs, like images, not only for the event blobs, but also for some internally processing. So when the event organizer wants to see a report, we queue these requests on a queue, and when the request is finished, the result is placed on a blob, and the user is informed, and he gets a direct link to that blob storage. So he will get like an URL with a SAS token to have a limited time window to download that report. And at the end, we clean it up, the blob, also with Azure functions that will be triggered every day, every hour, to check if there are old reports on that. The SQL Server, we split it up in two databases. This mainly because we wanted to make a segregation of all what's user information and what's probably GDPR sensitive information with the Thola platform itself. In the end, we also could have considered to segregate the configuration and operational data, but it's something we didn't do this. So in Thola, we have a configuration of the venue, the rooms, how many people are allowed in a room, if there is a special room where you have a secret access code that needs to be enabled. These are all configurational data. The database structure, which I will not present in this slide, so it happens, everything disappears. So, do you see my slideshow still, or?
Yeah, we see up till SQL Server. Now it's SQL Lore.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a glitch in my screen. I'm still using Windows 10. Maybe Microsoft is silently nudging me to move to Windows 11, but I didn't got the time. Anyway, I was talking about the configuration and operational data. I will not show you a data model of the application that would go into too much detail of the application. But what is interesting to point out is that the event, the room configuration is one big blob storage. One big blob in a SQL table. So it makes us a flexible design in how we're gonna add new features to the room. So we don't need to change the database structure for that. We could consider to use another way of storing this information, but in the end we opted for SQL Server because we thought it would be less amount of data. In the end, we found out that this is not that true. So we had added a cache later on to keep the configuration data in cache, so that with the next call we could. We have speed on that querying front. The operational data is more for tracking to see what kind of user is doing what. Later on in the process, when the event is on, we use this operational data to provide a report to the event organizers. But one of the other operational data is this team meeting. We keep a link to the team meeting from Teams in our database too. So when other people join the meeting, we can reshare this link. And maybe I didn't show this explicitly, but we use, I'll go back to the overview one moment. So I should have stressed that more. So we use Teams. We all are in the Teams front end. We access the Teams from our clients. We don't gonna use Teams in the backend and channel it forward to you guys and do our streaming ourselves. But we only ask with Graph API an online meeting. So what we use in Teams is only one feature of this product. Before we started Thola, we had like the beer house application for Microsoft. It was like a proof of concept to see what can we do to extend Teams? Can we add some nice features, interaction? But that was very, it doesn't give us a lot of flexibility. We had to stay in Teams. We had to be using users, and you should everybody of you had to have a guest account in our tenants. So that was not a real option. So that's why we only use the online events of Teams. So I go further. So we use Singular to track the real-time visitor notification, but also to inform what kind of events. So before the meeting started, you all got like a pop-up saying that, oh, the session will start within 5 minutes. This messaging is changes in this messaging is sent to you via Singular. Also, when you say, okay, I'm not present anymore, this also communicated by Singular. We do not use Singular for every API call. We only use it for that real-time messaging. The key vault, as you saw on the design, we use a key vault. This is only to store the external secrets, and the main ones are our social logins. So you could log in with Microsoft. Therefore, we have a client ID and client secrets, but also Mailjet. We also use this key vaults in our application. We call the key vault from our application to store additional secrets from external companies. So it is possible in Thola to use your own Teams account or your own Teams tenant. In that case, we need to know, of course, we need to have a user with a password, and all this sensitive information is stored in the key vaults. The user and a password is needed because an online meeting needs to have an organizer. You can't organize a meeting without this online meeting. And that's why in Thola we only have, correct me if I'm wrong, we only have one license, is it?
Yeah, we have one license for the Thola platform. Indeed, we have some other, of course, for the people that are working for Thola, but to setting up all the meetings, we can indeed do that with one license.
Yeah.
Last year, in 2020, we had an event with 3,000 people in the maximum online, and then we had a couple of hundred meetings and all simultaneous meetings, all just run with one Teams license. Yeah. But we checked it with Microsoft, and it's okay.
Yeah, they don't mind because people who have Teams probably also have an Office license, so that's fine for them. For internal communication, internal connection to say if the API wants to update something in the key vault, he uses this managed identity, and we grant that managed identity to have read-write access to the key vault for the things, the areas where it needs. So we use secretless configuration for this. There is a CDN, yeah, that's easy, no much to explain. And like I said, so the Teams is a graph. We use a graph API to create an online meeting and directly connect with the Teams server. So why do we use a service plan versus what is now more popular serverless setup? The project, the development started, I think it started almost 2 years ago. And the maturity of the team a little less than 2 years ago. I think it was in May or June we started.
May 2020.
Yeah, we started with this, and the maturity was not there to confidently say, okay, we're going to try it, everything serverless, and we know in advance that everything is manageable with serverless. One of the issues with serverless is that you need to authenticate, enable the authentication within Singular. It's a little bit harder to set up. But also this visitor tracking was an issue we couldn't resolve. The API has an internal in-memory cache. It's just a dictionary with all the users and their position in the platform. And using serverless wouldn't be an option then, because the serverless instance is start up maybe for 1 or 2 minutes and then tear down again if it's not used anymore. So that was not an option for us. Also, with working with an app service was more, people knew better how it will behave and how it works. However, it's not like we don't want to move to serverless. We really want to see if it would be an option. And we are still considering some solutions to that visitor tracking problem. Okay. You don't see any Kubernetes, which is also a popular move to go to Kubernetes. For us, the number of identifiable microservices, or I put it micro between brackets because it's an overly blown term. So the identified services, the APIs that would belong to each other, were very low. I think we could see like 3, 4, 5 groupings of microservices. And the entry cost to start up a Kubernetes is high, very high. So we didn't consider Kubernetes at all in the beginning. Then there is no Redis cache. When we talk about visitor state tracking, you would think, yes, why don't you cache everything in a session like or in a Redis cache? That would be a very nice option. We have examined this possibility, but there is another feature we need to wait to query all the state of the visitors. So when there is a latecomer in the event, he needs to know at once to know where everybody is. So that's why the state cache needs to provide this information in one query in one go to the users. And we can't query the Redis cache for all the keys they have in the data in their cache. So you can query individual keys, and we can have like, okay, a list of all visitors. But for every user query, like in this case, we have 13 or 16 attendees. If you have to query the state of every 16 attendees, whenever one new visitor enters the application, that would kill the Redis cache. So we didn't use the Redis cache after thoroughly seeking this out. So this was the overview of the architecture. Are there questions, or are there people saying, "Hey, you missed that. Why didn't you use this or another feature of Azure that maybe we overlooked?" So we secretly try to pick your brains to see what we can update or improve to the Thola application. Or if you have questions on a little bit more detail on one part of the architecture, please raise your hand and we can or unmute yourself and ask the question.
This looks like a typical Belgian audience.
It's a Flemish audience, yeah.
A Flemish audience, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask a question here. You probably have heard of something like Azure Container Apps as something new to actually, let's say, avoid that high cost of Kubernetes, right? Is that something you're looking into, or do you say, no, that's not really something that provides a lot of benefit over application service? Because that's always the struggle, indeed, that people have is, yeah, indeed, if I can do it with application services, why use anything else, right? So is that something you're looking at, or?
So there is something new. So we have the Azure Container Instance, but now there is something like a shared container thing in Azure.
Yeah, it's actually using Kubernetes under the hood, but you don't see it, right? So that you don't need to learn everything about all that stuff, and it also does scaling based on all kinds of parameters and so on for you automatically. But of course, you would need to build your application in containers, right? I mean, that's of course the idea. It's container apps.
So
I think the container apps is not a problem, but from my point of view as a business owner, I see more value in moving into serverless because we have events with a higher load, and then we have periods where the event managers are configuring, but we also have periods where nobody is using the platform. If you're in between. We have several days that maybe nobody is even accessing the platform, and then if you're going to Kubernetes, you're still running on the minimum cost, which is even higher than an app service at the moment. So I think serverless would be just even more interesting for us than Kubernetes. From the financial part of view.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I see in the chat there is a question about the multi-tenancy and the events are running in parallel. That's true. All events are running in parallel. And the multi-tenancy is done on organization level. So an organization can have multiple events and there is multi-tenancy. And that multi-tenancy is done by adding an extra column in the table. So we don't have like multiple instances or even using multiple databases. This is, let's see, the Serverless is a multi-tenant setup, or do you have a provision separate instance? So we don't provision separate instances of the app. However, there is a customer who asked for this tool. So we have a process set up for in case of a customer saying, I want to have my own instance with my own database, with my own information. Everything is automated with, forgive me, with ARM, not Bicep, and a process with scripts to deploy to other environments. Why ARM? Because 2 years ago, Bicep, for me, was rather unknown. So this script, this thing to set up a separate instance, it serves two purposes also. One, in case if there is a failure in West Europe and Azure West Europe is down, which every manager asks, what are we prepared for that? And yes, we are prepared for this in the case of a manual intervention, but I don't believe it will ever be needed. A second case is to put up a parallel environment, and we had to do that once because they wanted to attack our environment with a pen tester to see if we are secure enough.
We also had have one question that's still open with a large international customer that really want data separation. So there we also gave the option to create a fully separate instance of Thola specific for that one customer, but then you're in enterprise level. So then they just got their own environment, but then of course they have to cover all costs of the environment as well. But that's not our default setup. Yeah.
So, and did we already have events that were ongoing at the same time?
Yeah. Even our the first day, I remember the discussion in August of 2020. I said we need to be able to run separate events on the same time from for different customers probably, and then we thought, okay, is it really gonna be needed or not? In the architecture design, it was important to choose if it's possible or not. So we decided to do. And then a couple of days later, I got a request from the customer that the first day that we launched, September 2020, we had an event for Microsoft. And the same day, we had an overlapping event for another party. So we had on our launch day 2 separate parallel events. So.
Yeah,
and afterwards we still had a couple of times. Yeah.
There's another question is how easy it is to work your way into a private session based on session IDs login. So the authentication process is when you log in to an event, you log in with the event as a tenant reference in Azure in Identity Server. So this references is added to your token. You cannot use the same. So we use EWTs, no session IDs. So it's a Java Web Token. And in that token, it explicitly is burned in the token that you're there for that event. So if you would say, okay, I'm going to open the browser, steal someone's token and try to enter another event, the application will just redirect you back to the event where you have logged in. So you really need to go through the login process, and the token is marked for one session. What's APIM, Steve?
API management.
Sorry.
We didn't use API management indeed because we don't. The only API that we provide for our customers is the invite API. So that just one or two methods that we expose, and all the rest is for internal usage. So that's why we didn't see the need. And that, again, for a startup to start with low costs, of course, we didn't see the need to put an API management on top of that. But I know that it's something in the future that will probably need to come in place if we're gonna. We're also working towards more partnerships, and the more partnerships we get, probably the higher the chance will be that an API management will be in place in between. It's the same with the application gateway. We don't have an application gateway in the front, but that's also something that in the future, if you are looking into ISO 27001, the security certificates will probably be a necessary component.
Like I said,
and maybe one extra thing that I would like to add, Dries, to your answer of the stealing sessions. We work with we call it the one-click logins. We did our passkeys actually in Identity Server, the technical term. And if you share your link with somebody else, we would recognize it that another user, with another client, you're logging in with the same account, and then you would be logged out from the other part. So you can't share your credentials to join the event with many people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So when you are logged in and somebody else logs in with the same session ID or same user, the system will tell that to you with singular. So it's singular who says to us, do we have a session for that user? And we have a second session for that user. You cannot log in with your mobile or laptop at the same time. That's true.
Right. Yeah.
So if there are no more questions, then we'll go forward to the next part of the slide deck, and that's the issues.
This maybe one thing to add. What we now see, it's not the architectural part, but just about the virtual events. If you give the people the possibility to answer questions on a paper and bring it up front, like now in the chat, this works for Belgian audience as well, or Flemish audience. If you would do it in a live location, probably we won't get questions, but now we get some, so that's nice to see.
Yeah, so you have the benefits and the drawbacks.
Yeah.
My drawback would be you can't have a drink after the event. That's my drawback of a virtual event.
Yeah.
But now let's go over the issues along the road. So 2 years ago in September, the first event we organized, everything was working fine. All of a sudden, the traffic was going up, no issues. The servers were very, very low in usage. But there was something going on strange. The API had to call to the identity server who was already in the event and who was not there, who was subscribed to the event. And that become very sluggish. So let's look over the symptoms. So we have timeouts. That's the only thing we saw, timeouts between requests between the components. There was no CPU or memory problems. The servers were running fine. I think we scaled it up during the events very high, and it didn't solve anything. And when you access the component directly, we got a fast response. So we don't know why the request timed out. So after some reflection after the event, we realized that the problem only existed between the two different app services. So we go from service, the API, to the identity server. There was no issue going directly to one of those endpoints. So we theorized that this could be caused by a port exhaustion. So what happens is that when you do a call to an HTTP request, I need to be careful. The async await will keep track of that port, and it will wait till there is a response back. So we'll put on an async await queue, and if that takes too long, you get a timeout. These things, the async await task list is not reported. So you don't see how many tasks are on task list back then. I think now they added like different logging events within .NET Framework to log those metrics. But back then you didn't saw that. And in the end, we solved it by adding an additional layer of caching between the API and the identity server to allow a rush to the API be handled by that cache. And it doesn't interfere with the API connecting to the identity server.
And the cache didn't create any problems because everybody was asking the same, which was okay to just ask it once, I think every 5 seconds. That we do it now. If it's asked, we cache it for 5 seconds, and then everybody gets the same result. Instead of there was an event with 960 people online, and if you then ask every 5 seconds the same question for everybody, of course that's something we oversaw in our testing upfront.
Yeah. The next problem we encountered was with a really big audience. We had 3,000 visitors. It was for the Flemish government. Everything was going perfect. That was logic because everybody sat in a nice conference and they were watching Teams, and they didn't walked on our platform. I talked about walking because, yeah. That's correct.
It was not in Teams, but it was just in the auditorium. It was an embedded YouTube, but
it was an embedded YouTube. So everybody was in the auditorium at the same place and watching a YouTube. So it didn't stress our environment. But when that stopped, everybody started walking. Virtually walking around the conference, and they go from room to room. What happens that the single hour had to work and communicate to those 3,000 people. If one user goes to that room, it needs to communicate to all the other users. Oh, he's in that room now. And that's to create the effect of people coming into a room, and that you can actually kind of start talking with them by hovering over the person and say, okay, I want to speak to you. To create that effect, that's why the single R service needs to communicate all this information to them. So what we saw was a whole sudden loss of all single R connections. The single R service dropped away. And of course, when everybody drops away, we had 3,000 visitors all trying to reconnect, and that made the recovery very hard. This was something we couldn't figure out on our own how to handle it. And lucky we are, what kind of partnership do we have with Microsoft? We are
the premium support contract.
Premium support, thanks to Kronos. We have a premium support contract. So they investigated and they saw that the CPU was actually at 100%. I have a pointer, but the pointer doesn't work really well. But the CPU was running at 100% for a while, and we had underscaled our singular instance. The problem with the singular instance is that it doesn't auto-scale, which is a really lacking feature of it. So you need to, in advance, give an idea of how many people you expect and how many messages you expect. So we calculated this. We said, okay, for so many users sending so many messages in a distributed way, you need 1 or 5 units. But we misinterpreted the performance recommendations. So in the meantime, they updated their page, so it was more clear now. But we missed that there was a limit on what they thought. What we were thinking was per connection. This was actually the overall limit. So we were really stressing the system out, and we couldn't see that when we saw the single R service. We saw their connections and say, okay, that was by design, and we interpreted the number of connections and message sizes, and that's the only thing you see in the logs. And according to the performance estimates, that was fine. But we don't see any CPU usage or memory usage of the instance or an alert that it's been overly used. So that was a lack of the singular service. What we do learn from this is that if you follow the recommendations, you still have like a 50% margin to go over before it will crash. So it delivered more than 12% of the documented performance. So their recommendations are very on the safe side. I think they're working now on an auto-scaling feature for Singular. I'm not sure if they already have it, but it's one of the most asked requests, probably because we are asking for it every time we see someone from Microsoft. The second issues, which is not really an issue, is that the app service scaling during the startup of an event. When the event starts, we usually have like a peak in the beginning. And when people settle and in their meetings or in their auditorium and are watching the event, and everything is fine. But this sudden scale up and scale down, actually scale out, is sometimes delayed. We try to be as aggressive as possible, saying if your CPU is over the 50%, we already scale out. But even then, it takes some time before the new instance is online. So that's the disadvantage of an app service plan, of course, with Azure Functions. It scales much quicker, or even with Kubernetes, I think it will probably scale much quicker than with an app service plan. Scaling up and scaling down is even much worse. So what we do at the moment is manually scaling up and scaling down when we know there is a new event coming with a large audience. And in the future, we hope to do this based on a planning of based on information from our configuration. So when the event is approaching and we see that there are a lot of attendees already registered or invited, then we will try to guesstimate what the best step would be and do scale up. And after events, scale down, of course, because that's something you may not forget. And another issue along the road is more, maybe Wouter can explain it better. It's related to
it's more like a legal issue that we came up indeed, is that the MailChimp, we use transactional email component from MailChimp, which was previously Mandrill, and then the GDPR, I don't know, the European government decided that MailChimp was blocked to be GDPR proof. So then we had of course had a problem with a couple. You saw the names in our customer list as well. People like companies like Kleis and Engels and KPMG. They are very keen on being GDPR proof. Of course, it's very important for them, but that made that we needed to change to MailChimp. But luckily, we did some good. Are very keen on being GDPR proof. Of course, it's very important for them, but that made that we needed to change to MailChimp. But luckily, we did some good architecture decisions in the beginning, and it was not that hard to change. The only thing we needed to do was to create all the templates again, and then change the implementation in the interface. I created a new implementation, and then a new deployment was the luck is that. So that
the luck is that we didn't use MailChimp for the campaigning part, so we only used the mailing to have a template and to send a mail out to individual users. So that's luck in this case. So that were the issues we had along the road, and I want to point out to some improvements we are thinking about. And if there is a budget and there is a need for, we can improve on. So what we have is this centrally cache that every node of our API has to manage. And instead of using it in in-memory cache, I was thinking about why not use a table storage, using an event to update the table storage as soon as something changes, and provide a link to the visitors directly to that table storage with a SAS token or something like that. So whenever they arrive to the event, they will need to pull down this visitor state once, and then it will be updated to the Redis cache. I see that the recording. Okay.
I'll try to restart it.
No, I think individuals are recording. So the table storage is an option. So when we're gonna move this cache to the table storage, then we could also be able to use a Redis cache to keep up the state, and that would be easier for us to switch over to a more serverless solution. Because if we don't have that, if we don't need to store the visitor states, then we can move to Azure Functions or something like that. But then there is also the case of authentication. At the moment, we use a type of authentication mixed a little bit. So as we use the managed identities, we also allow the API to be called by the Azure function. So the Azure function will call, we eat our own dog food, like we said. The Azure function will call the API. So the API has actually a double authentication pattern in it. It will accept managed identities, and it will accept our own identity managed identities. And that's something we need to figure out how it will be solved within an Azure function, because there, if you want to use authentication, there are a couple of options with Azure functions. One is the easy authentication feature of Microsoft, and another one is, I think, is in isolated mode of the Azure functions you have to run. But that's something to investigate. Yeah. Another thing, we are using our app services for static web pages. This is a waste of energy for the app service, because it only provides static webs. And now that there is a new feature from Microsoft, new type of resource in Azure, we could easily move these static web apps to the SPA applications, the front ends, to static web apps. And something I'm looking to improve is how can we do a better performance testing? Because in our case, doing performance testing is rather hard, because we have those web sockets from Singular, and we used K6 in it's sort like a node-like performance testing tool. We did use that a year ago to test our application. Perhaps there are better solutions, but this K6 performance testing tool doesn't really work well with Singular WebSockets. So we are looking for some better performance testing and time to implement those type of performance testing. So that's it. What are the things we're thinking now for improvements? And maybe, well, like Geert says, the managed Kubernetes system that Microsoft Azure provides, maybe that's also an option for the future. So I'm gonna wrap up. If there are questions, remarks, or suggestions, please share them. And then I would like to thank everybody. Their questions.
Questions or even suggestions from
especially the last one.
Our ideas that we have. Thank you, Michel, for the comments about the platform.
I'd like to thank everybody for at least staying for so long. So
thank you, Bernie. Bernier, I don't know.
Bernier was correct.
Okay.
So I think we can wrap up. Maybe Geert would like to finalize.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting to see how this was built with cloud native technology. So yeah, thank you all of you for attending. What we will do is we will hopefully, if the recording is okay, Wouter, we'll check it because I saw some messages about the recording being restarted or something. We will also put this up on our YouTube channel. So if you just go and look for TechTrain Mechelen on YouTube, you can find also the other older sessions that we did from the past. So thanks everybody, and see you some other time, hopefully.